Hello everyone! In this video I would like to talk to you about automating Cisco ACI. First of all, I will give you some essentials theory you need to know in order to start automation process, and after that I will walk you through different demonstrations with different automation tools. So first of all, let's discuss why you may need automation. First example will be lots of tedious and repetitive tasks. Let's say you need to create 100 bridge domains. If you do it via GUI, graphical user interface, you will go to ACI EPG, you will execute bridge domain wizard, and this wizard will walk you through different configuration steps. You will need to provide name for your bridge domain, some settings like IP for subnet, maybe some settings related to bound traffic like ARP flooding, etc. etc. And you have to go through this wizard 100 times. Not very exciting task, right? So automation can help you here, and you can actually create 100 bridge domains in just in a single click. And I will actually show you how to do so in our demonstration section. Second example would be executing workflow, which consists of multiple steps in different GUI tabs and maybe in different environments. So let's say we have a very common example, and we need to migrate our legacy data center to ACI. So here we have legacy DC. It has, let's say, SVI for VLAN 10. And we want to migrate that SVI to our new ACI fabric. Typically, you will need at least 4 steps. You need to disable SVI in the legacy network. You need to copy MAC address from SVI to bridge domain. You need to associate BD with layer 3 out, and you have to start advertising bridge domain subnet inside ACI, actually from ACI to legacy backwards. To do so, you have to go to your legacy network, maybe via CLI, maybe via GUI, maybe via API, doesn't really matter. Do all that stuff related to step number 1. Maybe you just need to shut down SVI interface, maybe you need to do some additional steps. After that, you switch to ACI, you go to tab number 1, copy MAC address, go to tab number 2, associate BD with layer 3 out, go to tab number 3, and start advertising bridge domain subnet. So basically you need to go from one tab to another tab, maybe switch between environments, between ACI and legacy, etc. etc. So I would say it will take you maybe 10 seconds, maybe 15, maybe 20 seconds. If you automate this task, you may reduce this time to, let's say, approximately 1 second. So you will just create some script which will automatically or automagically go to your legacy network, go to ACI, and do basically all the same steps, but very quickly. Some environment, they can't actually allow you to disrupt traffic for 10 or maybe 20 seconds, but 1 second could be okay in those types of environments. And last example which I have here is related to putting ACI into a bigger workflow. So let's say you want to implement self-service portal for developers in your company. So developers need to test something. In order to test something, test some code, they need IT infrastructure like virtual machines, network storage, etc. 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 So you create self-service portal for them. Probably it is not related to networking, but this self-service portal will have to talk to some kind of orchestrator. And orchestrator will talk to different IT infrastructure components like network, virtualization, storage, maybe compute. And in order to do this part, communication between network and orchestrator, obviously you have to know how to automate networking part, how to interact with ACI, with EPG in a programmatic manner. I've just given you 3 simple examples, but when we are talking about automation, the sky is your limit. So it's not a comprehensive list. If you have any idea, if you have any task which is tedious, which is repetitive, or you have any type of complex or not so complex workflow, I'm pretty sure that it can be automated. It just depends on how much code you need to develop, you need to write. So again, this is not a comprehensive list. If you have any other application for scripts for automation, please do so. Anyway, let's go let's move forward. And next step in our video today is 3 things you actually need to know to automate ACI. So first of all, you need to understand how ACI object model and REST API works. Next, you have to choose some automation tool. And finally, if it is required, you may need some data with configuration. To give you a quick example, if you want to create 100 bridge domains and you don't really care about naming, you can create simple for loop and create bridge domains. 1 bridge domain, 2 bridge domain, 3, etc., etc., all the way through bridge domain 100. If you are okay with these names like BD1, BD2, BD3, BD100, in that case you don't necessarily need data file with some configuration. If you want to create bridge domain with actually meaningful names like BD web, which obviously will be related to bridge domain for web servers. Next would be bridge domain database, bridge domain for databases. BD AD, maybe for your Active Directory infrastructure. In that case, you can create just some very basic loop and loop over it. In this particular case, probably you will create some kind of spreadsheet. You will create column with name, and you will provide those names like web, db, ed. And instead of looping through numbers, you will loop over rows in your spreadsheet and derive information which you actually need from that spreadsheet, from that data. Now let's talk about object model and REST API. So first of all, this is not ACI overview video, so I expect that you know that ACI has lots of different objects like tenants, VRFs, subnets, endpoint groups, application profiles, layer 3 outs, contracts, etc., etc., etc. So obviously, if you want to automate something, you have to understand how this thing actually works, and moreover, you should understand how it works behind the scenes, because many times it could be very simple on the surface, but quite difficult again behind the scenes. But at the very basic level, you should understand that everything inside ACI is an object. Objects may have a relationship between each other, like, for example, bridge domain and VRF. When you create bridge domain, you associated it with VRF. Sorry. And one more thing, one object could be embedded into another. Parent-child relationship or nested objects. So, for example, when you create VRF, you create it under tenant. Or when you create EPG endpoint group, you create it under application profile. So it belongs to application profile, and application profile belongs to tenant. So you can't just create EPG in ACI. You should create EPG inside application profile, and application profile, you should create it inside tenant. So there is some nesting, some hierarchy. So in most cases, I would say that you don't need to know the whole ACI object model, the whole tree, the whole hierarchy, because this object model is quite big. I would say it's huge. So typically, if you want to automate some simple task, if you want to create, I don't know, 100 bridge domains, you should understand how API representation looks like for this particular object, let's say for bridge domain. You should know which settings are essential, which you may skip. You should understand the relationship between bridge domains and other components inside tenant. And that's pretty much it. If you need more complex workflow, well, you repeat the same step for all objects you need. So if you want to automate creation of tenant, application profile, endpoint group, everything inside it, you have to have quite good understanding of all these objects and how they are tied together. But anyways, as an overall idea, and as a starting point, you should know that hierarchy exists, that objects have relationships between each other. They could be embedded, they could be nested, etc., etc. And you should understand and you should know how you can gather enough information if you need to. And I will show you how to do so in our demonstration section. And REST API, to put it very, very simple, it is ability to configure ACI or gather information from ACI using HTTP methods. And in 99% of cases, I would say we will use GET or POST methods. HTTP has another methods like put, delete, and many more. But as I said, 99% of cases can be accomplished with GET and POST. So what's the difference? GET, we will use this method to gather data, for example, configuration, statistics, or state. And POST, we will use it to actually configure ACI. For example, create something, delete something, change something. And in order to gather that information, first of all, information about object model, information about which methods you need to use. There are two very useful built-in tools. First of all, this is API Inspector and tool called SafeS. We will look at both those tools in our demonstration section again. So, when you have good understanding of ACI object model and its REST API, at the next step you can choose automation tool. In this video we will talk about Postman, ACI toolkit, HTTP requests, and Ansible. But again, this list is not comprehensive. If you know other automation tool, if you know other programming language, scripting language, I don't know, maybe Ruby, maybe Perl, maybe something else, and you know that your language can execute requests to HTTP server, I think you are good to go, and you can use this tool to automate ACI. So as I've just said, this list is not comprehensive. If you know other programming languages, check it out. I think 99% of every popular and modern programming or scripting language can be used to automate ACI. But in this video we'll talk about, I would say, most popular tools. And finally, we need some data, again, if it is required. Inside data, we will typically define objects names, some configuration options, maybe IP for subnet if we're configuring bridge domain, BD settings, again, filter entries if we're configuring contracts, for example, and anything else you must have to create some object. Again, there are lots and lots of objects inside ACI, so you have to understand which settings are essential for them. So for example, if you want to create lots of bridge domains, probably you will create file with all those settings. Again, there would be name column, maybe IP column, maybe ARP flooding column. And you will fill the spreadsheet with data. So let's say we have bridge domain web, we have bridge domain for database, we have bridge domain for Active Directory. Here we will have IP 10.10.10.1. Here we will assign IP 10.10.20.1. And for our last bridge domain, we will assign IP 10.10.30.1. We will enable IRP flooding for web and DB and disable it for Active Directory. We will feed this information, this data, this file to our automation tool, and it will again loop through rows in the spreadsheet, derive necessary information, and use it to create necessary objects. And finally, we are ready to proceed with our demonstration. And today I will divide it into big parts. So at first we will create a single EPG using different methods. First of all, we will take a look how you can create EPG using graphical interface, CLI. We will paste JSON payload using graphical interface. After that, we will take a look at Postman, ACI toolkit, HTTP requests, and Ansible. And in second part, we will create multiple EPGs, again, using Postman, ACI toolkit, Ansible. So, with that being said, let's proceed and have some demonstration. So let's start with simple tasks. So here is my APIC. Actually, this is APIC simulator. So if you see that it is a little bit slow, don't be surprised. Let's go to tenants, and I've already created dedicated tenant for our demonstration, which is called YouTube. We go here. Also, I pre-configured it with VRF, bridge domain, and application profile. So first of all, let's create EPG. We give it a name, we call it web, and we have to associate this EPG with bridge domain. We do it right here, click finish, and here we are. Here we have our EPG. Now let's go to APIC CLI. Go to configuration mode, go to our tenant, as you can see here, it's quite slow. Now we go to application, and now we can create our EPG. We will call it web2. And as soon as this command is accepted by APIC, we will see this EPG created in graphical interface as well. So we will see it in UI. Let's execute it. Now let's go back to APIC, and again we can see this EPG right here. Now let's take a look at tool which is called Save As. So we can actually save API representation of ACI object. We need to select configuration, subtree, and JSON. If you prefer XML, feel free to use it. I prefer JSON. So I download it. And this is actual payload. This is API representation of this object, of EPG web.json. I use Sublime, and I can use plugin to prettify this output, because right now it's just one very big string, which is not really pretty. Now it looks better. So what do we see here? We see lots of settings for this EPG, and what we actually what we are interested in are distinguished name, DN, and name. So if we want to create one more EPG using JSON payload, we just need to change distinguished name, DN. We change it to web 3 because we already have web and web 2, and we need to change its name right here as well to web 3. And inside distinguished name, you actually see unique identifier for this object. So UNI stands for universe, TN represents tenant, AP represents application profile, and EPG obviously represents endpoint group. So we changed that information, we changed DN, and we changed name. We save this file, and now we can select our tenant, select post function, select our file, this one, and post it. And almost instantaneously we can see EPG called web3 right here. So that's it for simple methods for creating EPG, and I think now we're ready to test a real automation tool like Postman. Postman is an application which allows you to send requests to any web server. So first of all, it's not specific to Cisco or ACI. You can use it to send requests to other servers, other REST APIs as well. So first of all, when we use Postman, we have to create collection, and inside collection we will create so-called requests. So to put it very simple, request is equal to a single operation. So for example, if you want to authenticate against ACI, it would be single operation, it would be single request. If you want to gather some information from ACI, for example, show all tenants you have in your fabric, again, this is single operation, this is single request in Postman. If you want to create something, let's say you want to create EPG, again, this is single operation, it would be single request inside Postman. If you want to create another EPG, it would be one more request. If you want to create bridge domain, it would be, again, one more request. So first of all, let's take a look at requests I already have. We will see how they work, and after that we will create a request from scratch. And first of all, first thing you need to know is that each request typically will have three things. You will have to define method, and method typically defines what you are trying to achieve. Again, if you want to gather data from ACI, we will use get. If you want to change something, create something, delete something, you will use post. Second thing is URL. URL will define which object you are trying to gather information about, or which object you are trying to change. And finally, in some requests, you also need body. Body will define what actually you are trying to do with an object. So for example, if you want to create EPG, inside body you will define settings for this specific EPG, like name for this EPG, description of this EPG, relation between this EPG and bridge domain, etc., etc. So in terms of, from ACI standpoint, here inside body we will define settings for specific objects. So first of all, we need to authenticate, and it's for me it's quite logical. So if you go to graphical interface, first of all you need to authenticate. If you want to use CLI and you establish SSH connection, first thing you do, again, authentication. And if you want to make REST API call, again, first thing you have to do is authentication. In case with Postman, it will be post request. URL would be as follows, and body would be like that. Actually, for authentication, this request is quite standard. So if you just do a simple Google search for authenticating against APIC using API, you will find some documentation at Cisco website, which will give you all that information: method, URL, and body. And you will have to change only two things. Obviously, you will need to change IP address or DNS name. Obviously, you would put here your APIC IP or DNS name. And you will have to change credentials. So username and password right here. Everything else should be identical. And here, for name and password, I use variables. Variable called user and variable called password. These variables are defined under collection. Again, collection is a collection of requests. So all these three requests, authentication, show all tenants, and create EPG, are located inside collection ACI YouTube. If we go here to tab called variables, we can see these variables defined. User is equal to automation, password is equal to automation as well. Not a best practice, but this is a demonstration environment, so that's okay. So basically, my username is equal to my password. And this collection, again, user and password, we use them inside our body. So now we are ready to send this request and basically authenticate against ACI. So we send it via send button and we receive response. We received a lot of data, but what's important here is that we received token, which we will actually use in our subsequent requests as a cookie. So when we send request show all tenants or create EPG or any other request, we will put there this cookie. Actually, Postman will do it behind the scenes. You don't have to do anything additionally. And somewhere here, all the data basically says which privileges this user have. And by this user, I mean that user called automation, which we use to authenticate. Now, when we are actually authenticated, we may proceed with sending other requests. And actually, one more interesting thing here is that method for this request is post. It is post because actually we are changing something in ACI. We are creating authenticated session, so it's not just gathering some data, it's changing some data, creating session. So now let's go to our second request, which is quite simple get. So we gather some information, and what we gather is all tenants from our fabric. To do that, we actually make a call to class called fvTenant.json. And body in this case is empty, again because we're just gathering information from ACI. So if we send it, we receive information about all the tenants we have in ACI. Tenant infra, tenant management, tenant common, tenant YouTube. If we go back to our APIC, we can see these 4 tenants right here. And next request I have here is related to creating EPG. Again, if we are creating something, we're changing something, we use post. For URL, we will take a look at it a bit later. When we will be creating a request from scratch, I will show you how to identify, how to derive this URL. And for body, I think we see here similar information which we already downloaded from ACI. So if we take a look at our API representation of EPG, specifically EPG Web3, we see almost identical information right here. The only difference is that we use EPG www here in distinguished name and in name as well. So if we go back to ACI, we check our application profile, and here we have 3 EPGs, Web, Web2, and Web3. If we send this request, we will create one more EPG called EPG www. So let's do so. We send it, go back to ACI, and we have one more EPG, www. So this is very basic application of Postman. So as you can see here, we can easily create EPG using this tool. So now let's try to create this request from scratch, because now it may be difficult to understand how I get all this information, how I managed to create this body, how I managed to create this URL and this method. So in order to derive all that information, we may use, again, built-in tool called API Inspector, and we will do it right now. In order to use API Inspector, you go to APIC User Interface UI, we go to the top right corner and click Show API Inspector. And right now, we see that Epic created one more browser window for us. Now we need to create an object manually. So we go back to our main window, we create one more EPG, web4, we specify bridge domain, and we hit finish. We see our EPG right here. We go back to our API Inspector window, and actually we see lots of information here. But typically, the only thing you need is post request, because all the data, all those GET requests is something that your web browser is doing behind the scenes. So while you are just sitting and looking and staring at Epic window, behind the scenes, your browser actually constantly sending GET requests in order to refresh data in your browser. So anyways, we need to find our post. Here it is. And actually this is all information we need. So we copy it, go back to our text editor, paste it right here, and let's check what we see. First of all, we see method here. It is post. Next we see URL. Next we see our payload. And finally we see response. So what basically happened? We enabled API Inspector. We did some stuff manually, but actually, even if you configure something in ACI using UI, behind the scenes it will go through REST API. So actually, this is API representation of what we did with our own hands in graphical interface. So this is actually what we need. We need method, we need URL, and we need payload. So we go back to Postman. We create new request. Let's call it new EPG. We select method as post. We copy this URL, paste it right here, go to body, select raw, and select JSON as format. Now we copy our payload, starting with curly brace. Again, probably you want to prettify it, like this. Again, I copy it, paste it back to Postman, and that's basically it. So if I go back to Epic, first of all I will close API Inspector. Now I go back to Epic, I delete web4, go back to Postman, send this request, and here I can see EPG web4 again. So basically, I did the same stuff in Postman, which I previously accomplished via going through wizards in graphical interface. But what should I do if I want to create EPG? If I want to create EPG with different name? So let's delete everything we have here, and let's tweak our request a little bit. So first of all, I will save it. And now let's say we need to create EPG for database. To do so, first of all, I need to change URL, and I change EPG-web4 to EPG-db. Next, I change the N, again, because the N is our unique identifier. I change it from web4 here to db. Also, I change name. Also, I change RN, which is relative name. And that's pretty much it. Again, I save it, go back to Epic. We see, you can see that there is no EPGs. I send this request, go back to Epic again, and here you can see EPGDB. And if we go to policy and general, we see association between this EPG and bridge domain. Again, this setting is actually located right here. So this is association between this EPG and bridge domain called BD-1. So that's it for Postman. Now let's move forward and take a look at ACI toolkit, HTTP requests, and Ansible. And I will start with ACI toolkit. Again, ACI toolkit is a Python library developed by Cisco specifically for Cisco ACI. So first of all, you have to have some machine. In my case, this is Linux with Python installed and with ACI toolkit installed as well. Again, because this is an external, not built-in library. I will not go through all the steps related to configuring Linux, configuring Python, configuring ACI toolkit. So I expect if you want to use Python as your automation tool, you should know this stuff. So here we have EPG.py script, and actually the script will create a single EPG. Again, I will not go through all details of this code, of the syntax. So I expect that you, if you know Python, that you can install this library, read documentation, and understand what's happening here. So I will go through it pretty quickly. So first of all, we need to import this library. Next, we need to authenticate. Again, in order to authenticate, we need to specify URL of our APIC. We need to give it our credentials. We need to create session. And now we actually need to derive information about tenant, about application profile, about bridge domain, and after that we can successfully create EPG. So first of all, we gather information about all tenants, and we are searching for a specific tenant called YouTube. Next, we derive all application profiles from that tenant, and we need application profile called website. Next, we derive all bridge domains from that tenant, and we need bridge domain -1. Again, we need this information in order to establish association between bridge domain and EPG. And finally, we can create EPG, and we will call it www, and we will add description created by ACI toolkit. Finally, we will attach it to bridge domain, create that association, and finally send all this information to ACI in order to create all those things. And as you can see here, in case with ACI toolkit, we don't necessarily need to know method, we don't necessarily need to know URL or payload, because in this case, these things are actually abstracted. So we simply create EPG, provide it with a name and application profile. Of course, we have to do some stuff here in order to define, find and define interesting tenant, interesting application profile, interesting bridge domain. But generally, we don't have to be very explicit here. Those type of things are abstracted. So it may be a benefit for you. But on the other hand, you have to know syntax of this specific library, obviously. So let's go back to our graphical interface, and we see EPG called database here. And inside this script, we will create EPG called www. So let's run script. Go back to APIC, and we see EPG called 3W. We go to general, and we see description created by ACI toolkit, and we see association with bridge domain. So again, this is our description right here. And actually you can see here some output. So while I'm searching for tenant, application profile, and bridge domain, I will also print all information I have inside ACI. So this is again list of all tenants, list of all application profiles inside tenant YouTube, and list of all bridge domains inside tenant YouTube as well. So this is just for clarity. You don't necessarily need to do so. Now we can switch to HTTP requests, which is native Python library. Again, I will not go through all the details. I expect that you know Python if you want to use this tool. So here is our script, and on the other hand, it is quite similar to Postman. If we, when we use ACI toolkit, again, as I've mentioned, we have some kind of abstraction. If we use HTTP requests, we don't have that benefit. Again, we have to specify URL, method, and payload explicitly. So basically, we will do the same stuff as we did using Postman. Again, we need to import requests. We need to do authentication. Again, here you can see that I specify payload explicitly, the same way we did in Postman right here. So this is our payload in Postman. This is identical payload in Python script. This is our requests. Here you can see that it is actually post. We send this request, and here is one difference between using Python and Postman. In Postman, as I mentioned, this application will take care of this API cookie of this token automatically. If we do native Python, we will have to take care of it ourselves. So we need to derive the token from response which we will get from API. We will put it into dictionary, and we will use this dictionary in subsequent request as cookie right here. And again, this is our second request, which will actually create EPG. Again, if we take a look at this payload, it's almost identical to what we see right here, or almost identical. And also you can see here we add description created by Python requests. So we go back to our graphical interface, and in this case we already have EPG called www. So I delete it, go back to my Linux machine, and I will try to execute the script. Go back to APIC, and again we see this EPG. And here we see that description is created by Python requests, which is equal to what we defined here. And as you can see, I have some print statements as well. First of all, these warnings basically we see these warnings because I have self-signed certificate, and my Linux machine doesn't trust it. So we can safely skip it because again, this is just an environment for demonstration. In reality, you will have a correct certificate, and you won't see this error, this warning. And next, we see response from our APIC, and inside it we have that we see that token. Here it is. Actually, it's similar to what we see in Postman here. So when we send authentication request, we receive response, and inside response we receive token attribute. Similar thing we see right here. Obviously, token itself is different because it's different session with ACI with APIC. So that's it with HTTP requests and ACI toolkit. Now we can move forward and check Ansible. Ansible is quite popular tool for automation, and as Postman, it is not dedicated for Cisco or for ACI, so you can use it for automating other IT infrastructure as well. And as with Python, as with ACI toolkit, I expect that you know Ansible basics. So if you don't know, you can check series of videos on my channel dedicated to Ansible. Right now, I will just give you an example of a playbook, which again allow you to create a single EPG. So in my case, it is called epg.yaml, and like with ACI toolkit, we have some abstraction layer here. So we will authenticate with credentials, we will choose tenant, we will choose application profile, select EPG name, add description, add association with bridge domain. State will be present. It means that if this object exists, Ansible will do nothing. If it doesn't exist, it will create it. We won't validate certificates again because we have self-signed certificate, and we delegate this task to localhost again. This is specific how this module works in Ansible. So let's go back to our APIC. We have this EPG already created by Python requests. We will delete it and run our playbook. So I will execute Ansible playbook command, select this playbook, state of this task is okay, something was changed. Let's go back to APIC and we see this EPG once again. We go to General tab and we see description created by Ansible, which we defined right here. So quite simple, right? So right now we finished creating EPG using different methods. We created it using graphical interface, using CLI, posting JSON payload to graphical interface. We tried Postman, ACI toolkit, HTTP requests, and Ansible. But with all those tools, we created just a single EPG. Now let's try to create multiple ones, and actually we'll create 100 EPGs in just a single click. So let's go back to Postman and see how you can actually loop over some data and create multiple objects at a single time. So first of all, let's delete EPGs. Let's clear our application profile. And now, when we want to create multiple objects, we need some data. So in this case, this is our data. Quite simple JSON file with 100 objects. So basically, every single iteration has name characteristics, name attribute with value www1 for iteration number 1, www2 for iteration number 2, and all the way through iteration number 100. In this case, name would be www100. So in order to loop over this file in Postman, we need to create one more collection. We will add authentication request here. It is identical to this one, nothing new right here. And we need to create a post request to create actually EPGs, and we need to create a template out of it. So we need to put some variables. So if we take a look at our file, we have attribute called name, and we will use the same attribute as a variable inside our template. So we use this variable in curly braces right here inside our URL. We use it inside distinguished name, again variable called name. We use it inside name, inside relative name rn, and we also will add description created by Postman. So now we are ready to get our external file with data, loop over it, and actually send 100 requests. To do so, we go to our collection, we select run. Here, Postman will create new window for us. We need to select our file, ensure that data file type is application JSON. We can do a preview, and as I said, for iteration number 1, variable called name would be ww1. For iteration number 26, it would be www26, and again all the way through to iteration number 100. Here on the right side, you can see our request from that collection. And actually, we can disable authentication if we authenticate beforehand. If we don't do that, we will actually send 200 requests. So for every single iteration, Postman will send authentication request and create new EPG request. Authentication we really need to do that only once. So I will close it. I will authenticate beforehand, select run again, select our file, disable authentication right here. Now let's check that our application profile is empty. It is. Now we are ready to run it. We hit run. And we see that Postman is sending 100 requests. And all requests you can see right here. We can close it, go back to Epic, and we see 100 EPGs right here with description created by Postman. So this is looping over external file in a nutshell using Postman. Again, I will clear this data. And now we will do the same procedure using ACI toolkit and using Ansible. To do that in ACI toolkit, we need, again, file with our data, which is called EPGs.json in this case. Again, this is identical to what I showed you right here. And we have a different script called multiple EPGs. The only thing I added here is import JSON library. Here I actually read this external file, EPGs.json, this one. And I loop over this file. And in every single iteration, I will create EPG and I will derive its name dynamically based on data in that file. So our application profile is empty. We execute the script. And again, we see this beautiful procedure. We sit and do nothing, and script creating objects for us. Script has finished its work. And now we see again 100 EPGs right here with description created by ACI toolkit. If we go back to our script, that's what we set right here. Again, I can safely delete these EPGs, and we are ready for our final demonstration, which will be creating again 100 EPGs using Ansible. In Ansible, again, we will need file with data. It is data.json in this case. Again, it is identical to what we've to what we've seen already. Just a huge file with lots of data. And here is our playbook. And in this playbook, again, we will load this file, we will loop over it, and we will derive EPG name based on information in our file and based on every single iteration. And in this particular case, I'm not sure if it's Ansible fault or Apex Simulator fault, but I will have to add pause after every single iteration. So basically, Ansible will execute iteration number 1, wait for 1 second, then execute iteration number 2, again wait for 1 second, etc., until this playbook is executed completely. So our application profile is empty. Let's try to execute this playbook. And as you can see, EPGs are being created, in this case quite slowly. So while Ansible creating these EPGs, I would like to talk a little bit about use cases for automation. So as I've mentioned, use cases which I showed you in the deck, And examples which I showed you in demonstration, those are not comprehensive list of all use cases. So basically, if you want to automate anything in ACI, I think that it's possible. It just depends on the amount of code you need to develop, you need to write. So again, if you want to build some complex workflow, if you want to automate something in network, something in compute, something in virtualization, maybe something which is related to configuring some application, that's still possible. And in that case, well, ACI just will play a small role or a significant role in it. Also, you may gather some information from ACI, again using REST API. For example, you may gather some statistics information from ACI, maybe some state information from ACI, react to this information somehow, and maybe do some stuff based on what you defined in your script, in your program, in your application. So, for example, you may gather statistics from some interface on some leaf. If it gets over some threshold, maybe, I don't know, you will create some object, or I don't know, maybe you will restrict some type of traffic using contracts and filters. I think you get the idea. So those examples are quite simple in my opinion. If you want to create something more complex, that's absolutely possible. You just need to create a range, not a range. You just need to create multiple single tasks and put them into a bigger workflow. So right now we see that Ansible created 97, 98, 99, and finally 100 EPGs. Our playbook finished, and obviously we get identical result. So that's it for Ansible. To summarize, let's go through what we've accomplished in this video. So we created single EPG using different methods like graphical interface, CLI, pasting JSON payload, again using GUI. We took a look at Postman, ACI toolkit, HTTP requests, Ansible. After that, we created multiple EPGs, actually 100 EPGs, using Postman, ACI toolkit, and Ansible. I hope this video was informative for you. If you like it, please put your thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, feel free to share it with your friends and with your colleagues. So I wish you all of the best, and see you soon.